Rebecca Hayes knelt among the glowing moonflowers, carefully collecting their luminescent petals in glass vials. The crystal forest earned its name from the way starlight reflected through the translucent leaves, creating patterns of light that danced across the forest floor. She had been studying the unique plant life here for 6 months, documenting species that existed nowhere else in the known galaxy. The sound that interrupted her work was unlike anything she had heard before. It started as a whimper, soft and broken, followed by the rustling of something large moving through the undergrowth. Rebecca's heart raced as she stood, her collection bag forgotten. The crystal forest was generally safe, but there were creatures here that could be dangerous if startled. She followed the sound to a clearing where the trees opened up to reveal the night sky. What she found there made her breath catch in her throat. A dragon lay curled in the center of the clearing, her scales the color of polished silver catching the moonlight. But this was no mighty beast from the legends. This dragon was young, barely larger than a horse, and she was shaking so violently that her scales rattled like wind chimes. "Hello," Rebecca said softly, keeping her distance. "Are you hurt?" The dragon's head snapped up, her eyes wide with terror. They were the color of spring storms, gray and green swirling together. For a moment, Rebecca thought the dragon would flee, but instead she pressed herself lower to the ground, making herself as small as possible. "Please don't tell them where I am," the dragon said, her voice trembling. "I can't go back. I can't face it." Rebecca had heard the dragons of this world could speak, but she had never expected such raw vulnerability in that voice. She sat down on a fallen log, making herself less threatening. "I won't tell anyone, but can you tell me what happened? Why are you so afraid?" The silver dragon's eyes filled with tears that sparkled like diamonds in the moonlight. "My name is Silverwing. Today was supposed to be my coming of courage, the day when young dragons prove themselves worthy of the clan. We're supposed to fly through the Thunder Canyon during a lightning storm to show we fear nothing. And you couldn't do it," Rebecca said gently. "I tried." Silverwing's voice broke. "I stood at the edge of the canyon with my clutched siblings. They all dove in without hesitation, laughing as the lightning flashed around them. But I just froze. My wings wouldn't move. My body wouldn't listen. All I could feel was terror, so strong it made me sick." Rebecca's heart ached for this young dragon. She understood that kind of paralyzing fear better than Silverwing could know. "So you ran away." "I'm a coward." Silverwing's words were bitter. "Dragons are supposed to be brave, fierce, unstoppable. But I'm none of those things. I'm broken and wrong, and I don't deserve to be part of the clan." "You're not broken," Rebecca said firmly. "You're just afraid, and there's nothing wrong with being afraid." Silverwing looked at her with disbelief. "How can you say that? Fear is weakness. Fear means I'm not a true dragon." Rebecca stood and walked closer, moving slowly until she was just a few feet from Silverwing's massive head. "Can I tell you about humans? About how we understand courage?" The dragon nodded, curiosity momentarily overcoming her despair. "Humans aren't born brave," Rebecca began. "We're actually pretty fragile compared to most species. We don't have scales to protect us or wings to carry us away from danger. We get scared easily, and our fear is often what keeps us alive." She sat down on the grass, looking up at the stars. "But we learned something important over thousands of years. Real courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's about feeling fear and choosing to act anyway." "I don't understand," Silverwing said quietly. "Let me tell you a story," Rebecca said. "When I was younger, I wanted to be an explorer, to see new worlds and discover new things. But I was terrified of leaving home. The thought of getting on a spaceship and traveling to unknown planets made me physically sick with fear. But you're here now," Silverwing observed. "On this world, far from your home. Because I learned that fear is just information," Rebecca explained. "It tells you something might be dangerous, but it doesn't have to control you. Every morning for a year, I did something that scared me. Small things at first, like talking to strangers or trying new foods. Then bigger things, like taking short flights or camping alone. Each time, I felt the fear, acknowledged it, and then chose to act despite it. Silverwing was listening intently now, her shaking starting to subside. And that made the fear go away. No, Rebecca admitted. I was still terrified when I got on the ship that brought me here. But I had practiced acting despite my fear so many times that I knew I could do it. The fear was there, but it wasn't in control anymore. The silver dragon was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Do you think someone like me could learn that? Could learn to be brave, even while being afraid? I know you could, Rebecca said with confidence. Because you've already shown courage tonight. How? By running away, by surviving, by asking for help, by being willing to admit you're afraid, instead of pretending to be something you're not. Rebecca smiled. Those are all brave choices, Silverwing. A sound in the distance made them both tense. Voices calling out in the dragon tongue, searching. Silverwing's panic returned immediately. They're looking for me, the clan elders. If they find me like this, cowering in the forest, I'll be cast out forever. Rebecca made a quick decision. Come with me. I have a research station not far from here. You can hide there while we figure this out. Why would you help me? Silverwing asked. You don't know me. Because someone once helped me when I needed it most, Rebecca said. And because I believe you deserve a chance to learn courage in your own way, not the way others demand. They moved through the forest together, Rebecca leading the way along paths only she knew. The research station was a small building nestled in a grove of crystal trees, powered by solar collectors and designed to be nearly invisible from above. Rebecca opened the large equipment bay, a space meant for storing field gear, but large enough for a young dragon. Silverwing crept inside, still trembling but no longer on the verge of panic. Thank you, Rebecca Hayes. I don't understand why you're doing this, but thank you. Rest tonight, Rebecca said. Tomorrow we'll start working on helping you find your courage. But we'll do it the human way, one small step at a time. As she closed the bay door, Rebecca heard voices much closer now. She stepped outside to find 3 dragons circling overhead, their scales glinting in shades of bronze, crimson, and deep blue. They landed in the clearing near her station, their massive forms making the ground tremble. The largest, with bronze scales that looked like burnished metal, spoke first. Human researcher, have you seen a young dragon in these woods? Silver scales, small for her age? Rebecca met the dragon's gaze steadily, fighting her own fear of being confronted by 3 adult dragons. I've seen many creatures in these woods. Why are you looking for her? She is Silverwing, daughter of our clan, the bronze dragon said. She failed her trial today and fled in shame. We must find her before she brings more dishonor to her family. What will happen to her when you find her? Rebecca asked. The crimson dragon, a female with a voice like crackling fire, answered. She will face the council. If she cannot prove her courage, she will be exiled. It is our way. Rebecca felt anger rising in her chest, but kept her voice calm. She's just a child. Surely there's another way. You do not understand dragon ways, human, the bronze dragon said, not unkindly. Courage is everything to us. Without it, a dragon is nothing. They searched the area around her station, but found no trace of Silverwing. The equipment bay had thick walls that masked both scent and sound. After an hour, they departed, promising to return at dawn to continue the search. Rebecca waited until their wing beats had faded completely before opening the bay door. Silverwing was curled in the corner, tears streaming down her scaled face. They think I'm nothing. My own clan thinks I'm worthless. They're wrong, Rebecca said fiercely. She climbed into the bay and sat beside the dragon, placing her hand on Silverwing's massive foreleg. You have value, Silverwing. Your worth isn't defined by how fearless you are. It's defined by who you choose to be and how you treat others. But I'm so afraid, Silverwing whispered. All the time. Of everything. Then we'll work with that fear, Rebecca said. We'll teach it to work for you instead of against you. Tomorrow, we start your real training. Not the dragon way, but the human way. What if I can't do it? What if I'm too broken to fix? Rebecca squeezed the dragon's leg gently. You're not broken, Silverwing. You're just learning. And I promise you, I'll be here every step of the way. That night, as Silverwing finally fell into an exhausted sleep, Rebecca sat outside under the crystal trees and made a call on her communication device. The face that appeared on the screen was familiar and dear, belonging to James Parker, her childhood friend who now worked as the colony's environmental engineer. Rebecca? It's late. Is everything okay? James, I need your help, she said quietly. And I need you to trust me, even if what I'm about to tell you sounds crazy. James's expression shifted from concern to determination. Tell me what you need. As Rebecca explained the situation, she saw no judgment in James's eyes, only the same compassion that had made them friends since they were children. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. So, you're hiding a dragon from her own clan? He said finally. Yes. And you want to teach her human methods of dealing with fear? Yes. James smiled, the same gentle smile she remembered from 1,000 shared adventures. When do we start? Relief flooded through Rebecca. Tomorrow morning. Can you bring some of your equipment? I have an idea for how to begin her training, but I'll need your engineering skills. I'll be there at dawn, James promised. Rebecca, what you're doing is kind, but it's also dangerous. If the Dragon Council finds out you're harboring Silverwing, there could be consequences. I know, Rebecca said, but some things are worth the risk. After the call ended, Rebecca looked up at the stars and thought about courage, about fear, about the young dragon sleeping in her equipment bay. She had spent years studying plants that grew in impossible conditions, species that thrived where they shouldn't. Maybe Silverwing was like those plants, just needing the right environment and care to flourish. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, at least, one frightened dragon had found sanctuary. And sometimes Rebecca thought that was enough to change everything. James Parker arrived just as the first light of dawn painted the crystal forest in shades of gold and amber. Rebecca met him at the edge of the clearing, her exhaustion evident but her determination stronger. He carried 2 large cases of equipment and wore the practical work clothes he always favored, his brown hair still messy from an early wake-up call. She's still sleeping, Rebecca whispered, leading him toward the research station. I don't think she slept properly in days. James set down his equipment carefully. Tell me about her. What exactly are we dealing with? Rebecca explained everything while they prepared. Silverwing's paralyzing fear, her failure at the coming of courage, the clan's impending judgment. As she spoke, James listened with the careful attention that had made him such a good engineer. He solved problems by understanding them completely first. So we need to help her face her fears without overwhelming her, James said thoughtfully. Build confidence gradually. Exactly. I was thinking we could start with controlled environments. Small challenges that she can succeed at, then progressively increase the difficulty. James smiled at her, and Rebecca felt warmth spread through her chest. They had known each other since childhood, growing up in the same colony on Earth before both deciding to come to this frontier world. Lately, she had noticed the way his smiles lingered, the way his eyes seemed to find her in any room. And if she was honest with herself, she had been noticing him differently too. You always were the compassionate one, James said softly. Remember when we were kids and you found that injured bird? You spent weeks nursing it back to health. And you built it a special perch so it could rest while its wing healed, Rebecca recalled. We make a good team. We do, James agreed, his gaze holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. A sound from the equipment bay interrupted the moment. Silverwing was waking up. They entered together to find the young dragon stretching carefully, her silver scales catching the morning light that filtered through the high windows. Good morning, Rebecca said gently. Silverwing, this is James. He's here to help. The dragon regarded James with wary eyes. Another human. How many will know my shame? It's not shame, James said, his voice kind but firm. Fear is a natural response to danger. Your brain is trying to protect you. The problem is when that protection becomes a prison. Silverwing looked surprised. You understand? I have a fear of deep water, James admitted. When I was young, I nearly drowned in a lake. For years, I couldn't even look at a pool without feeling panic. But I learned to work with my fear instead of letting it control me. How? Silverwing asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. By starting small and building up. Rebecca and I have a plan, if you're willing to try. Over the next hour, they explained their approach. They would create controlled scenarios where Silverwing could practice facing fears in a safe environment. Start with tiny challenges and gradually increase difficulty. Celebrate every success, no matter how small. Most importantly, never force her beyond what she could handle. The first exercise is simple, Rebecca said. We're going to work on your response to sudden sounds, since that seems to trigger your panic. James had brought a device that could produce various sounds at different volumes. They started with soft noises, clicks, and gentle tones that Silverwing could hear without flinching. Each time she remained calm, Rebecca praised her. When the volume increased and Silverwing showed signs of panic, they immediately returned to a comfortable level. You're doing wonderfully, Rebecca encouraged after an hour. You're already showing improvement. I still feel afraid, Silverwing said, but there was less despair in her voice now. That's okay, James replied. The goal isn't to stop feeling afraid. It's to keep functioning even when you're scared. They spent 3 days on sound desensitization. By the third day, Silverwing could remain calm through moderately loud noises. She still tensed, still felt fear, but she no longer froze completely. On the fourth day, they moved to the next challenge: heights. Dragons were meant to soar through the skies, but Silverwing's fear of falling made flying terrifying. James had constructed a series of platforms at progressively higher levels in the forest. We start here, Rebecca said, standing on a platform only 3 feet off the ground. Just hop up here with me. Silverwing eyed the small height with trepidation, but managed to join Rebecca. They stood together while James called encouragement from below. How do you feel? Rebecca asked. Scared, Silverwing admitted, but less than I expected. Good. That's progress. They stayed on that platform for an hour, just existing in the space until it felt normal. Then they moved to the next level, 5 feet up. Then 8. By the end of the week, Silverwing could stand on a platform 20 feet high without collapsing into panic. As they worked together daily, Rebecca found herself growing closer to James in ways that went beyond friendship. The way he patiently encouraged Silverwing, his gentle humor when the dragon felt discouraged, his quiet strength that made everyone around him feel safe. They shared meals together, planned exercises together, celebrated small victories together. One evening, as they watched Silverwing practice spreading her wings from a high platform, James reached for Rebecca's hand. She didn't pull away. I'm glad we're doing this together, he said quietly. Me too, Rebecca replied, her heart beating faster. Rebecca, I need to tell you something. I've been wanting to say this for months, but I was afraid of ruining our friendship. He turned to face her fully. But watching you work with Silverwing, seeing your courage and compassion, I can't keep quiet anymore. I'm in love with you. I have been for a long time. Rebecca felt joy burst through her like sunlight. James, I love you too. I think I've loved you for years, but I was too scared to admit it. He smiled, that wonderful gentle smile that made her heart flutter. Funny how fear affects us all, even when we're teaching others to face it. They kissed as the sun set over the crystal forest, a moment of perfect connection between 2 people who had finally found the courage to be honest about their feelings. When they pulled apart, they found Silverwing watching them with what could only be described as a dragon smile. You two are like the bonded pairs in the old dragon tales, Silverwing said. Souls that find each other across all obstacles. Speaking of obstacles, James said, his arm around Rebecca's waist, we need to address the biggest challenge. Your clan is still searching for you, and the trial date is approaching. 2 weeks had passed since Silverwing had fled. During that time, dragon search parties had combed the forest regularly. Rebecca and James had become experts at hiding Silverwing, but they all knew this couldn't continue forever. The trial of flames is in 5 days, Silverwing said, her earlier happiness fading. If I don't appear, the council will declare me exile in absentia. My family will be shamed forever. Then we make sure you're ready, Rebecca said firmly. Tell us everything about this trial. What exactly do you have to do? Silverwing explained. The trial of flames required young dragons to fly through a canyon filled with fire geysers that erupted unpredictably. The path was narrow, the flames intense, and the heat could be overwhelming. Dragons had to navigate through without hesitation, showing they feared neither fire nor death. "That's insane," James said bluntly. "That's not testing courage, that's testing recklessness." "It's our way," Silverwing said quietly. "And if I want to remain part of my clan, I have to pass it." Rebecca and James exchanged glances. They had made incredible progress with Silverwing over the past 2 weeks, but this was an enormous challenge. Still, they had to try. "Then we prepare you," Rebecca said. "James, can you create something similar? A controlled fire environment where Silverwing can practice." "I can set up some fire barriers using controlled fuel burns," James said thoughtfully. "Nothing as dangerous as actual geysers, but enough to simulate the experience." They spent the next 3 days in intensive training. James created a course with fire barriers that Silverwing had to fly between. They started with small flames at wide intervals, gradually increasing both the size of the fires and the narrowness of the path. Silverwing struggled. She could handle the heights now and had grown comfortable with loud noises, but fire triggered primal terror. The first time she approached the flames, she froze completely, unable to move forward or back. "I can't do this," she sobbed. "The heat, the smoke, the way the flames move. It's too much." Rebecca stood at the entrance to the course. "Silverwing, look at me. Not at the fire, at me." The dragon's storm-colored eyes focused on Rebecca's face. "Tell me what you're afraid of," Rebecca said. "Burning, falling into the flames, the pain. Those are real dangers," Rebecca acknowledged. "Your fear is giving you good information. But here's what else is true. You're a dragon. Fire is part of your nature. Your scales are designed to withstand heat. The flames you're looking at right now can't actually hurt you. But in the real trial, they can," Silverwing pointed out. "Yes," Rebecca admitted. "But you're not in the real trial right now. You're here, in a safe place, with people who care about you. This is practice. Let yourself feel the fear, acknowledge it, and then take one step forward. Just one." Silverwing trembled, but took a single step toward the flames. "Good," Rebecca said. "Now another." Step by step, with Rebecca's voice guiding her and James adjusting the flames to manageable levels, Silverwing made it through the course. It took 2 hours for that first attempt, and she was shaking the entire time, but she did it. By the third day, she could fly through the course at a reasonable pace. She was still afraid, her flight path still wobbled, but she no longer froze. She had learned to act despite her terror. The night before the trial, the three of them sat together under the crystal trees. Silverwing was quiet, processing everything she had learned. "I'm still afraid," she said finally. "The trial tomorrow terrifies me." "Good," James said. "If you weren't afraid, it wouldn't be courage. It would just be doing something easy. What if I freeze again? What if I get there and I can't move?" Rebecca moved closer, placing her hand on Silverwing's foreleg. "Then you remember this. Courage isn't about being perfect. It's about trying. Even if you fail, even if you freeze, the fact that you showed up and tried is brave. But I'll be exiled if I fail." "Maybe," Rebecca said gently, "but you'll know you tried. You'll know you faced your fear instead of running from it. That's worth something." Silverwing was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you both. For everything. For believing I could be more than my fear." "You already are more than your fear," James said. "You're kind, thoughtful, and braver than you think. You just needed someone to show you how to see it." As they prepared to sleep, Rebecca and James held each other close. Tomorrow would determine Silverwing's fate, and by extension, their own. If the Dragon Council discovered they had been hiding and training Silverwing, there could be serious consequences for human-dragon relations. "Are you scared?" James whispered. "Terrified," Rebecca admitted. "But I'd do it all again." "Me too," James said, kissing her forehead. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together." Dawn came too quickly. They traveled with Silverwing to the Canyon of Flames, where the trial would take place. Other young dragons were gathered there with their families, all looking confident and eager. The clan elders perched on the canyon rim, their ancient eyes missing nothing. When Silverwing appeared, a ripple of shock went through the crowd. Many had assumed she was already gone, too ashamed to return. Her mother, a magnificent dragon named Moon Whisper, flew down with tears in her eyes. "My daughter," Moon Whisper said, her voice breaking. "I thought I had lost you." "I'm sorry, Mother," Silverwing said. "I was afraid." "And now?" Moon Whisper asked gently. "I'm still afraid," Silverwing admitted. "But I'm going to try anyway." The head elder, an ancient dragon named Stormclaw, called the trial to order. His voice boomed across the canyon. "Silverwing, daughter of Moon Whisper, you have returned to face your judgment. Do you wish to attempt the trial of flames?" Silverwing's whole body was shaking, but she spread her wings and lifted her head. "Edo, then take your position." As Silverwing moved to the canyon entrance, Rebecca squeezed James's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. They had done everything they could. Now it was up to Silverwing. The young dragon stood at the edge, looking down into the canyon where fire geysers erupted in seemingly random patterns. The heat was visible, making the air shimmer. Other dragons watched, some with sympathy, others with barely concealed scorn. Silverwing took a deep breath, looked back once at Rebecca and James, and then dove into the canyon. For the first few seconds, she flew well. She navigated around the first two geysers with only minor wobbling. But then a massive plume of fire erupted directly in front of her, larger and closer than anything they had practiced with. Silverwing froze in midair, her wings locking up. She began to fall. Rebecca's heart stopped. This was it. Silverwing would crash, fail, be exiled. All their work for nothing. But then something extraordinary happened. As Silverwing fell, she heard Rebecca's voice in her memory. Feel the fear, acknowledge it, and act anyway. 5 feet from the canyon floor, Silverwing's wings snapped open. She pulled up hard, the heat from the rocks below scorching her belly scales. She heard gasps from above, but didn't stop. She flew back up, heading straight for the geyser that had frightened her. This time, when the flames erupted, she flew through them. Her scales protected her from the worst of the heat. She felt the fear, felt every instinct screaming at her to flee, but she kept flying. Through one geyser, then another, then another. Her flight path was not elegant. She wobbled and nearly hit the canyon walls twice. But she kept going. When she finally burst out of the canyon's far end, the watching dragons erupted in stunned silence. She had done it. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but she had done it. Stormclaw's expression was unreadable as Silverwing landed before the council. "You hesitated. You nearly fell. Your form was poor." "Yes," Silverwing said simply. "I was terrified, but I finished anyway." The elder dragon studied her for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he smiled. "And that, young one, is true courage. Not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. You have passed the trial of flames." Moon Whisper rushed to embrace her daughter, tears flowing freely. Other dragons called out congratulations. Silverwing had not only passed, she had shown them all what real bravery looked like. As the celebrations continued, Stormclaw approached Rebecca and James. The ancient dragon's eyes were knowing. "You too trained her, taught her human ways of courage." Rebecca tensed, unsure if they were about to be punished. "Yes, Elder. We did." "Good," Stormclaw said simply. "Perhaps we dragons have been too rigid in our thinking. Perhaps there is more than one kind of courage." He looked at Silverwing, who was surrounded by her family. "Thank you for saving one of our own." As the sun set that evening, Rebecca, James, and Silverwing sat together at the edge of the crystal forest. The young dragon's silver scales now seemed to glow with confidence, not just reflected light. "What will you do now?" Rebecca asked. "I'll stay with my clan," Silverwing said. "But I'll also come visit you both. I want to learn more about human ways. Maybe I can teach other young dragons who struggle with fear." "You'd be amazing at that," James said. Silverwing looked at them both with deep affection. "You saved my life. Not just my physical life, but who I am. You showed me that being afraid doesn't make me broken." "You saved yourself," Rebecca corrected. "We just showed you how." As they watched the stars emerge, Three very different beings bound by friendship and courage. They knew this was just the beginning. Silverwing would go on to revolutionize how young dragons were trained, creating a more compassionate approach that honored fear rather than demanding its absence. And Rebecca and James would continue their work, their love growing stronger with each passing day, building a life together based on the same principles they had taught Silverwing. Face your fears, be kind, and never give up on those who need help. Sometimes the bravest thing anyone can do is simply refuse to let fear win. 3 months had passed since Silverwing's triumph at the Trial of Flames. The young dragon had become something of a legend among her people, not for her flawless performance, but for her honest struggle and ultimate victory over fear. She split her time between her clan and visiting Rebecca and James, becoming a bridge between two species that had coexisted but never truly connected. Rebecca stood in the garden she had planted near the research station, watching James build an extension to the equipment bay. They had officially moved in together 2 weeks ago, and every day felt like a new adventure. The crystal forest bloomed around them in impossible colors, and life felt almost perfect. Almost. The communication device on her wrist buzzed urgently. It was Governor Chun from the main human colony, her voice tight with stress. "Rebecca, we have a situation. I need you and James at the colony center immediately." They arrived within the hour to find chaos. The colony's main hall was filled with both humans and dragons, voices raised in heated argument. At the center of it all stood Stormclaw and 3 other dragon elders, facing Governor Chun and her council. "What's happening?" Rebecca asked, pushing through the crowd. Governor Chun looked exhausted. "The Dragon Council has made a formal request. They want to expand their territory into the Eastern Valley. The problem is that's where we plan to build our agricultural center. Both species need that land. There must be a compromise," James said reasonably. "We've been negotiating for weeks," one of the human counselors said bitterly. "But neither side will budge. The dragons say they need the valley for their young to practice hunting. We needed to grow food for our expanding population." Stormclaw spoke, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "We do not make this request lightly. Our traditional hunting grounds are becoming overcrowded. Without space for our young to learn, our clan cannot survive. And without agricultural expansion, our colony will face food shortages within 2 years," Governor Chin countered. "We understand your needs, but we have our own survival to consider." The argument escalated, with dragons and humans shouting over each other. Rebecca felt her heart sinking. After everything they had accomplished, after Silverwing's triumph had seemed to bring the species closer together, they were on the brink of serious conflict. Silverwing appeared at Rebecca's side, her scales dull with distress. "This is bad. I've heard some of the warrior dragons talking. If negotiations fail, they want to take the valley by force. The military advisors are saying the same thing on our side," James said grimly. "Both species are preparing for the worst." Rebecca looked between the arguing groups, her mind racing. There had to be another way. The Eastern Valley was vast, surely large enough for both species if they could just find a way to share it. But generations of separation had left humans and dragons with no framework for cooperation. An idea began forming in her mind, audacious and possibly foolish, but it might be their only chance. "I have a proposal," Rebecca called out, her voice cutting through the noise. The room quieted, all eyes turning to her. Governor Chin looked skeptical, but gestured for her to continue. "What if we created a joint trial?" Rebecca said, "A challenge that requires both humans and dragons to work together. If we succeed, we prove that cooperation is possible. Then we design a shared-use plan for the valley that benefits both species. And if we fail," Stormclaw asked, "then we go to arbitration with a neutral third party. The Galactic Council, perhaps." The Dragon Elder considered this. "What kind of trial did you have in mind?" Rebecca took a deep breath. "The Fire Summit." Gasps rippled through both humans and dragons. The Fire Summit was the highest peak in the region, an active volcano that erupted unpredictably. Its slopes were treacherous, covered in sharp volcanic rock and toxic gas vents. No one had ever successfully reached its summit. That's suicide, one of the human counselors said flatly. Perhaps, Rebecca agreed. But it's also the perfect test. Dragons can fly, but are vulnerable to the toxic gases that hover at certain altitudes. Humans can navigate the ground paths, but can't cross the lava flows. Together, though, we might succeed where each species alone would fail. Stormclaw's eyes gleamed with interest. A trial of cooperation rather than individual strength. Unconventional, but intriguing. I'll go, Silverwing said immediately. I'll represent the dragons. Silverwing, no, her Mother Moon Whisper said, fear evident in her voice. You've proven yourself already. You don't need to risk your life again. This is more important than just me, Silverwing said firmly. If humans and dragons are going to live together peacefully, someone has to show it's possible. I want to be that someone. Then I'm going too, Rebecca said, as the human representative. Absolutely not, Governor Chen said. Rebecca, you're a botanist, not a mountaineer. We should send trained soldiers. This isn't about combat skills, Rebecca argued. It's about trust. Silverwing and I have already proven we can work together. We have a bond that soldiers and warriors don't have. James stepped forward, his face pale but determined. If Rebecca goes, I go. Someone needs to handle the technical equipment, and I'm the best engineer we have. Rebecca started to protest, but James took her hand. We're in this together, remember? Whatever comes. After heated debate, the councils agreed. The expedition would consist of 3 humans and 3 dragons. Rebecca, James, and a security officer named Torres, Silverwing, her clutch brother Flamecrest, and an elder dragon named Ashwing who had survived more battles than anyone could count. They had 1 week to prepare. The night before the expedition, Rebecca and James lay together in their quarters, neither able to sleep. The fire's summit loomed in the distance, its peak shrouded in smoke and ash. Are you scared? James asked quietly. Terrified, Rebecca admitted. This is so much more dangerous than anything we did with Silverwing's training. We could back out. No one would blame us. Rebecca thought about that, about the safety of refusing, of letting someone else take the risk. But then she thought about Silverwing, about the young dragon who had learned to face her fears, about the future where humans and dragons might work together or might tear each other apart over a valley. No, she said finally. We can't. Someone has to try. James pulled her closer. Then we try together. Dawn came too quickly. The expedition team gathered at the base of the fire summit, their supplies packed, their equipment checked and rechecked. Dragons and humans who had been arguing days before now stood together, united in hoping for success. Governor Chen pulled Rebecca aside. Bring them back safely. All of them. Stormclaw spoke to Silverwing in the dragon tongue, words that made the young dragon's eyes shimmer with emotion. Then he turned to address the entire group. This trial is unprecedented, the elder dragon said. Never before have our species attempted something like this together. Some say it is foolish. I say it is necessary. May you find the courage to succeed where generations before you have failed. They began the ascent. The lower slopes were relatively easy, covered in hardy vegetation that clung to volcanic soil. Rebecca documented plants as they climbed, unable to suppress her scientific curiosity even in these circumstances. James navigated their path using topographical maps, while Torres kept watch for dangers. The dragons flew overhead, scouting ahead and reporting back on conditions. For the first few hours, it felt almost like an adventure. That changed when they reached the toxic zone. Greenish-yellow gas hung in layers across the mountainside, deadly to breathe. The dragons, who had been flying, were forced to land. Their superior sense of smell made the fumes even more unbearable to them than to humans. We need to cross this section on foot, Rebecca said, pulling out breathing masks from their supplies. Stay low where the gas is thinner. But dragons were large, their heads naturally held high. Silverwing tried to crouch, but still breathed in toxic fumes. She began coughing, her body convulsing. We need to turn back, Flamecrest said, his own eyes watering. We cannot pass through this. Wait, James said, thinking quickly. He pulled out emergency filtration units from his pack. These are designed for humans, but maybe we can adapt them if we connect multiple units together and create a larger airflow. He worked rapidly, connecting equipment in ways it wasn't designed for, but might just function. Within 20 minutes, he had created a makeshift breathing apparatus large enough for a dragon's snout. Try this, he said to Silverwing. The young dragon fitted the device over her nose and mouth. After a moment, her coughing subsided. It works. I can breathe. They created devices for all 3 dragons, and the group continued upward through the toxic zone. It took hours, but they made it through, humans and dragons working together to overcome an obstacle that would have stopped either species alone. The next challenge came at the lava fields. Rivers of molten rock cut across their path, too wide for humans to jump and too hot for comfort. The dragons could fly across easily, but the humans were stuck. Leave your equipment, Ashwing, the elder dragon said. We will carry you across. Torres looked skeptical. Draguns carrying humans. That's never been done. Then we make history, Ashwing replied. One by one, the dragons carefully lifted the humans and flew them across the lava flows. It required trust on both sides. Humans trusting dragons not to drop them, dragons trusting humans not to panic and cause them both to fall. Rebecca clung to Silverwing's back as they soared over the molten rivers, feeling the young dragon's powerful wings beating against the hot air. Below them, lava bubbled and spat, death waiting for any mistake. But Silverwing flew steady and sure, her earlier training giving her the confidence to carry her friends safely. They made camp that night at the midpoint, exhausted but encouraged. Humans and dragons sat together around a carefully controlled fire, sharing food and stories. Barriers that had existed for generations began to crumble. Why did humans come to this world? Flamecrest asked. You had your own planets. We're explorers, Torres explained. Always looking for new places, new experiences. This planet called to us with its beauty and mystery. And we welcomed you at first, Ashwing said. But then we kept our distance. We were afraid of being too close, of losing our independence. We were afraid too, James admitted. Your legends made you seem fierce and untouchable. We didn't know how to bridge that gap. Until Rebecca and Silverwing showed us, Rebecca added, smiling at the young dragon. Silverwing looked around at the group, at species that had been strangers, now sitting together in the firelight. Maybe fear isn't just individual. Maybe whole societies can be paralyzed by it, just like I was. And maybe, Ashwing said thoughtfully, courage can spread just as fear does. The final ascent began at dawn. The summit was close now, visible through the smoke and ash. But the last stretch was the most dangerous, a narrow ridge with sheer drops on both sides, constantly buffeted by volcanic winds. The dragons tried to fly, but the winds were too unpredictable. Silverwing was nearly thrown into a cliff face before she landed, shaking. We can't fly in this. The wind patterns are chaotic. Then we climbed together, Rebecca said, all of us on foot. They roped themselves together, humans and dragons, in one long line. Step by careful step, they advanced along the ridge. The wind howled, trying to tear them apart. The ground beneath their feet crumbled with every step. Halfway across, disaster struck. A section of the ridge collapsed beneath Torres, sending the security officer tumbling toward the drop. The ropes snapped taut, and suddenly everyone was being pulled toward the edge. Ashwing dug her claws deep into the rock, anchoring the line. Flamecrest grabbed Torres with his talons, but the weight was too much. They were all sliding toward death. Let me go, Torres shouted. Cut the rope. No. Rebecca screamed back. James was thinking frantically, looking for a solution, and he saw it, a stable outcropping just below them. Silverwing, can you fly down there and create an anchor point? The young dragon looked at the chaotic winds, at the certain death of the fall below. Every instinct screamed at her to stay safe, to not risk the flight. But she looked at Torres dangling over the void, at her friends depending on her. She jumped. The winds caught her immediately, throwing her sideways. She fought them with everything she had learned, every lesson about acting despite fear. She reached the outcropping and drove her claws deep into the rock. Now, she called. They swung Torres toward the outcropping. Flamecrest flew down, fighting the winds, and between him and Silverwing, they hauled the human to safety. One by one, they moved everyone to the stable ground. They sat there for long minutes, catching their breath, processing how close they had come to complete failure. "You saved us," Torres said to Silverwing, his voice shaking. "You flew in those winds when it should have been impossible." "I learned from the best," Silverwing replied, looking at Rebecca. "Fear doesn't have to stop you." The final push to the summit took another 3 hours. When they finally stood at the peak of Fire Summit, looking out over the world below, they were no longer just 3 humans and 3 dragons. They were a team. Rebecca planted a flag at the summit, one that combined human and dragon symbols. "We did it. Together, we did something impossible." The journey down was easier, both physically and emotionally. Word of their success spread quickly. By the time they reached the base, hundreds of humans and dragons waited to celebrate. Governor Chun and Stormclaw stood side by side, something that would have been unthinkable weeks before. "You have proven cooperation is possible," Stormclaw announced. "The Dragon Council agrees to a shared use plan for the Eastern Valley. And the Human Council accepts," Governor Chun added. "We'll work together to design a space that serves both our needs." In the weeks that followed, humans and dragons collaborated on the Valley Project. Dragons helped clear land with their fire and strength. Humans designed irrigation systems and shelter structures. Young dragons practiced hunting in designated areas, while human farmers cultivated crops in others. Silverwing became an official liaison between species, teaching young dragons about human cooperation and young humans about dragon culture. She worked alongside Rebecca and James, who had become the unofficial ambassadors of the new alliance. 6 months after the Fire Summit expedition, Rebecca and James stood together in the Eastern Valley during the first joint harvest celebration. Dragons and humans worked side by side, gathering crops that both species would share. James pulled Rebecca close, looking out at the impossible scene before them. "We did it. We actually changed the world." "Silverwing changed the world," Rebecca corrected. "She showed everyone that fear doesn't have to define us." As if summoned by her name, Silverwing landed beside them, her silver scales gleaming in the afternoon sun. She had grown over the past months, not just physically, but in confidence and purpose. "I have news," the young dragon said, her eyes bright with excitement. "The Dragon Council has approved my proposal. We're creating a new training program for young dragons, one based on human methods of courage building. No more throwing hatchlings into danger and hoping they survive." "That's wonderful," Rebecca said, hugging the dragon's massive foreleg. "And there's more," Silverwing continued. "We want to create an exchange program. Young humans will train with dragons, and young dragons will train with humans. We'll learn each other's strengths, each other's fears, each other's courage." "When do we start?" James asked. "Tomorrow," Silverwing replied, "if you'll help me teach." They spent the evening planning the new program, their excitement building with each idea. They would create something unprecedented, a generation of humans and dragons who grew up together, who understood that differences made them stronger, not weaker. As the sun set over the Eastern Valley, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Rebecca thought about how far they had come. From a frightened dragon in a forest clearing to a new era of cooperation between species. It had started with one act of compassion, one decision to help rather than turn away. "What are you thinking?" James asked, his arm around her waist. "I'm thinking about courage," Rebecca said. "How it spreads like ripples in water. Silverwing learned it from us, but we learned just as much from her. And now those ripples are spreading to hundreds of others. Thousands, eventually," Silverwing added. "Generations of humans and dragons who will grow up knowing that fear is just the beginning of bravery, not the end of it." They stood together as the stars began to appear, 3 very different beings bound by friendship and shared purpose. The world around them was changing, old boundaries dissolving, new possibilities emerging. Silverwing had learned that being afraid didn't make her broken. Rebecca and James had learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is reach out to someone different from yourself. And together, they had taught entire societies that cooperation wasn't weakness. It was the ultimate form of strength. Years later, when historians studied this period, they would point to the Fire Summit expedition as the turning point. But those who lived through it knew the truth. The real change began in a forest clearing, with a frightened dragon and a compassionate human who refused to walk away. That was where courage truly lived. Not in grand gestures or impossible trials, but in small moments when someone chose kindness over fear, connection over isolation, hope over despair. And that courage, once ignited, could change everything. Rebecca watched young dragons and human children playing together in the valley below, their laughter mixing in the evening air. She leaned against James, feeling his steady heartbeat, and smiled. "We should get married here," she said suddenly. "In this valley, with both our communities present." James turned to her, surprise and joy lighting up his face. "Are you proposing to me?" "I am," Rebecca laughed. "We face volcanoes and toxic gases together. Marriage should be easy by comparison." "Nothing with you is ever easy," James said, kissing her. "But it's always worth it." "Yes, absolutely yes." Silverwing made a joyful sound, somewhere between a roar and a song. "A human bonding ceremony. Will there be fire?" "Please say there will be fire. We'll figure out how to incorporate both traditions," Rebecca promised. Human and dragon, united. And so they were. The wedding, held 2 months later, became another symbol of the new alliance. Dragons wove flower garlands with their claws, while humans created ceremonial flames. Stormclaw officiated alongside Governor Chun, speaking words of unity in both languages. When Rebecca and James exchanged vows, with Silverwing standing beside them as their honor attendant, there wasn't a dry eye in the valley, human or dragon. The celebration lasted 3 days. Stories were shared, friendships forged, and dreams planted for a future neither species could have imagined a year before. On the final night, as the festivities wound down, Rebecca found herself alone with Silverwing under the crystal trees where they had first met. "Do you remember that night in the forest?" Rebecca asked. "When you were so afraid you couldn't move?" "I remember everything," Silverwing said softly. "I remember thinking my life was over, that I would never be anything but a coward. And look at you now, teacher, liaison, hero of the Fire Summit." "I'm still afraid sometimes," Silverwing admitted. "Even now." "Good," Rebecca said. "That means you're still brave." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the lights of the valley below, where two species that had once lived separately now built a future together. "Thank you," Silverwing said finally, "for showing me what courage really means. For not giving up on me when everyone else had." "Thank you for teaching me that compassion can change the world," Rebecca replied. "That one small act of kindness can ripple outward until it transforms everything." As the stars wheeled overhead and the crystal forest glowed with bioluminescent light, they knew this was not an ending, but a beginning. There would be challenges ahead, disagreements, and setbacks. Learning to truly share a world would take generations. But they had proven it was possible. One frightened dragon and one compassionate human had shown that fear could be faced, differences could be bridged, and courage could be learned. And that, in the end, was the greatest lesson of all. Bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and choosing love anyway. Choosing connection. Choosing to stand beside someone who needs you, regardless of the cost. The trembling dragon had learned to fly through fire. And in doing so, she had taught an entire world how to soar.